It's time for Top Story on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Well, this week in the news, clean audit for the Hornell school system. And not only a clean audit, but they had something like $1.4 million in unused funds. The people from Drescher and Malecki were impressed with that news for the Hornell school system. In other local news, Canisteo Village board member Tom Mayo resigned this week. Congressman Tom Reed, we spoke with him in Washington on Monday. He said that former New York State Education Commissioner John King might not get the Arne Duncan job of Secretary of Education. So all that in the top story list for this week. Our guest to talk about those and other issues, Hornell Republican leader, 9th Ward Alderman, Deputy Mayor John Buckley. John, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Brian. Good morning.
Well, wanted to go over a few issues with you, and then I have a couple of sound bites, and I wanted to get your reaction. National, starting out with national first. The House Speaker politics, things appear that Reed was really not leaning towards supporting Congressman Kevin McCarthy for the House Speaker job. Reed, on a couple appearances on this station, would not come out and support McCarthy. He kept saying, well, let's wait. There's a lot of people out there who want this job. Let's wait. And I thought, I don't think he's going to support McCarthy. Of course, that came after news that McCarthy made that statement about the Benghazi investigations being done by the House of Representatives in order to bring down Hillary Clinton, which didn't help Kevin McCarthy's popularity. Reed, he says a lot of positive things about Utah Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz. And wondering, John Buckley, your thoughts first off on the Kevin McCarthy statement about Benghazi's purpose, the Benghazi hearings' purpose as being to bring down Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think as far as Kevin McCarthy's comments on the Sean Hannity show that night, Hillary Clinton ought to send him a bouquet of flowers or at least put him on the Christmas card list because he did her an enormous favor. She's running political ads nationwide now using the sound bites from that along with his image. So, he really did a lot of damage to himself. He did a lot of damage to the party by saying that. As far as Tom Reed supporting him goes, I actually had reached out to Tom personally and asked him not to support him. I'm glad he didn't. So I think there's just better people for that position. McCarthy, in my mind, is just another version of John Boehner, which I don't think the Republican Party needs at this time. John Boehner has just been steamrolled by the president time after time. It's capitulated again and again. And McCarthy, I think he should, look, it was amateur hour on Hannity that night with McCarthy. He should have never said what he said. To come out and say, it was the Benghazi hearings were purely political. Obviously, there's that element to it, but I think the larger question is, what happened? I mean, there's 4 dead Americans. Whether there's a political element or not, I think, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you want to find out what really happened. Was Hillary Clinton asleep at the switch? Why wasn't security beefed up? There's still a lot of questions that have gone unanswered, but unfortunately, because of a result of his comments, he's given Hillary Clinton a bunch of ammo to use against him and the Republicans going forward.
Sean Hannity weighed in on this. Of course, that happened on his show. Sean Hannity weighed in on his show on Thursday with Congressman Mark Meadows as a guest. This was right after the news on Thursday that Kevin McCarthy was not going to go for the speaker position after all. Meadows is in that thing called the House Freedom Caucus. This is a little interaction here between Meadows and Hannity. Kind of interesting because Sean Hannity asked Congressman Meadows a couple of tough questions here.
Why did you choose Daniel Webster over Jason Chaffetz as a group? Well, I can tell you that the caucus was very divided. There were votes for both Jason and Dan Webster. A number of us had divided loyalties there. Really, we had all made an agreement that the majority of the people in the Freedom Caucus, if they got behind one or the other, that we would put aside our personal preference. And because there is only power in voting as a bloc, you know, the minute you start to diminish that and get down to 20 people, you don't have the power to really affect change.
What about, you have all these scorecards that are in Washington. The Club for Growth gives a scorecard. The Heritage Foundation, the ACU gives a scorecard. And of the three candidates, Chaffetz, McCarthy, and Webster, the one with the lowest conservative record based on those pretty prestigious groups was Daniel Webster.
Well, really, they are prestigious, but that really underscores the other issue. And listen, Jason and I are good friends and certainly think alike and honestly vote alike on a number of issues. But I think it underscores the other part of this, that this is not ideologically driven. This is more driven from a standpoint of who's going to affect the change and change the policies to make sure every member has a voice.
That's an interesting phrase. This is not ideologically driven. John Buckley.
Well, of course it's ideology. I mean, that's what it's all about. You have the typical battle of the establishment or the moderate Republicans versus the more fiscally conservative, Jason Chaffetz and what is it? I think there's like 40 members or so of that Freedom Caucus. So
right.
In the Heritage Foundation, and I've looked at these scores before on different congressmen and different senators, and those scores do tell you something of where they are and how conservative they are, and how moderate they are, or in some cases how liberal they are. So those things do matter. But as far as the voting bloc goes, the one comment was, if the caucus needs to decide on one person and get behind it, because if the caucus fractures, then you don't really have that block of votes. So that's important. Jason Chaffetz from Utah, I think, is an outstanding congressman. I've seen him a lot on the different newscasts. A lot on Hannity and a lot of different Fox programs over the last couple of years. He's been a rising star, honestly. A very quick rising star. Think about how many congressmen are out there, and how few of them that the American public are really that familiar with. But Jason Chaffetz has really, carved out a niche, and he's been very outspoken. He actually ousted Darrell Issa from doing all these hearings. So he's an up and comer. So he's very conservative. I like him a lot. I hope Tom Reed does get behind him.
Chaffetz used the phrase, it's not ideologically driven. I thought that was very interesting. Now listen to this clip from Rush Limbaugh. This is Rush Limbaugh on his Friday show, and what he says about the media's reaction to the political downfall of Congressman Kevin McCarthy. Rush here talking mostly about the Washington political class.
Why isn't the media ecstatic that the Republicans are imploding this way? Instead of, why are they worried the Republicans are imploding? Have you figured that out? Has that hit you in that regard yet? What it should tell you is that McCarthy obviously is a Washington insider, and his fall from grace as future Speaker obviously is bad news to the insiders or the establishment in Washington, both parties. And the reason for that is it is perceived that Ted Cruz and the House Conservative Caucus are behind this, these Tea Party yokels, and it is viewed as these upstart conservatives taking control of the House, and they are outsiders. And so you see that the insider elites are bound together not by ideology, but by class.
What do you think of that, John Buckley?
I think Rush is, there's a reason Rush is so successful, not just for the entertainment value, but he provides the best analytical, analysis out there of anyone.
Yes, he does, and it doesn't seem that he's gotten too caught up in becoming part of the political class, because it seems really like they hate him.
Yeah. And
He keeps a distance. I remember hearing Paul Harvey say that once. Keep a distance from the people that you cover.
right. Yeah, and that's exactly right. And Rush, if you listen to the way Rush covers Donald Trump and some of the others, Rush has. You could have said at one time, Rush and Hannity and some of these other talk show hosts are just establishment mouthpieces, and they carry the talking points and whatnot, and that would have been true to a large extent. But now what you're seeing is the Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys of the world really coming out in support of the establishment, the anti-establishment.
The Tea Party. You saw that during Rush and Sean were very close to George W. Bush ideologically. Not Jeb, though. Somewhat with the father there, George H.W. Bush. A little bit less, but still a lot with W. Not at all with Jeb.
Yeah, and I think coming out of that era, coming out of the Reagan era, and Bush 1 through the Clinton years, and then with Bush 2, I think there was a lot of political capital built up over that time, with the Bush family. But and I think to a large part, George Bush did a great job being president in his first term. In the second term, however, I feel like he went off the rails quite a bit, and I wasn't impressed at all. And I think, most of the American public, and certainly a large number of Republicans feel the same way. You've seen the rise of the Tea Party as a result. The Republicans had the White House, the Senate, and the House, and they spent money like it was going out of style. I mean, obviously, the Democrats turned the tables and took over all three branches for a time, and this exacerbated that. So, through that, you've seen the rise of the Tea Party, and you have these caucuses with conservative Republicans in the House, and a lot of people pushing back. Rush Limbaughs and Sean Hannity pushing back against the establishment, and that's why you see Donald Trump rise so high through the polls and have these enormous crowds wherever he goes. Las Vegas, Dallas, Atlanta. Wherever Trump goes, he's drawing just thousands and thousands of people, and it's really a phenomenon. And you talk about Jeb Bush, who is the epitome of the political establishment, has all the money, all the connections, all the infrastructure, but he can't get above. I think he's stuck at 6 or 7%,
something like that.
Yeah, and depending on what poll you're going by. And he's basically spinning his wheels. He's got all this money, spending ads, and he can't get any traction. You put him next to a Donald Trump, and Trump called him low energy. Well, you know what? He is low energy, and Donald Trump is just knocking it out of the park. There was a Quinnipiac poll that just came out just this past week, and it was a poll of swing states, and it had Trump leading in Florida, had Trump leading in Pennsylvania.
And Rush Limbaugh pointed out, do you notice how the media announces that news? They always make it a Trump failure in that somebody's behind him is catching up a little bit but hasn't beaten him yet.
Well, I know. I mean, poll after poll, Trump is leading. Trump's leading the Republican primary in Pennsylvania, another important swing state. Ohio, virtually every state, every poll I've seen, Trump is still in the lead. There's a reason for that. He's really caught lightning in a bottle. So, I think some of these establishment candidates going forward are going to have. They're already having a hard time. Look at Rand Paul. Rand Paul polled very well back in the spring, and a lot of people thought he was going to be the next darling of the Republican Party, and he's stuck at 1 or 2%, running out of money very quickly, I might add. And so are a lot of these other candidates. The George Patakis and Lindsey Grahams. What are they even doing? I think they're just trying to, in George Pataki's case, create some excitement for his business and do some other things outside of politics. He's not really running for president. Let's just be honest. He's never going to get it. But
some have speculated that he's trying to get a cabinet position and just getting the attention to do that.
Yeah, that could be. But honestly, I don't know. I guess it depends who the president would be to have him in his cabinet. I just don't see the value of having George Pataki in your cabinet. I think there's just better people out there. But getting back to the Trump phenomenon, I mean, you're starting to see a maturation of his candidacy. He's starting to roll out policy positions. His tax plan. I was going through his tax plan the past couple of weeks here, and looking at it, it's very Reagan-esque. Cutting the tax brackets down from I think 7 to 4. Slashing capital gains, putting more money in people's pockets to stimulate the economy. I've seen some early studies on a tax plan, projected to grow jobs by the millions. It's very Reagan-esque, and we haven't seen something that bold since Ronald Reagan was, ushered into office and slashed taxes dramatically way back in the 80s. So there's a lot of excitement.
Ben Carson, Dr. Ben Carson, the brain surgeon who's running for president, he made some statements that he's getting some flack for. One was that if more of the Jews in Europe in the 1930s and 40s had been armed and there had not been gun control under Hitler, then they would have been able to protect themselves more. And he's made a couple other controversial statements. How do you think that those statements will affect Carson in the polls?
Honestly, in Republican primary polls, I don't see those statements hurting him at all. And in fact, I was watching a newscast, and they had a focus group, and they mentioned Ben Carson's comments on having a Muslim president. And in the focus group, they actually had two focus groups, one in Iowa and one in New Hampshire, and in Iowa, I think there were 11 Republicans, and each one of them supported his comments, and I think 7 of the 11 in New Hampshire supported him. So, I don't think those comments really hurt him. Maybe Democrats and independents, they might not like it, but I think the Republicans, if you really listen to what he's saying, I think they understand him and agree with him to a large part. I think part of Ben Carson's problem is not necessarily what he says, it's how he says it. I think sometimes the way he comes across or the way he delivers his message can be easily misconstrued and twisted by the liberal media, which he should come to expect.
We're going to talk more with Hornell Republican leader, Deputy Mayor, 9th Ward Alderman John Buckley when we get back. We've talked national so far. When we get back, it'll be state and local issues. Stay with us. The show is Top Story. I'm Brian O'Neill. My guest this morning is John Buckley, the Hornell Republican leader. John, state issues. Governor Andrew Cuomo, since the Oregon shootings, has been calling for more gun control. It seems to happen every time there's one of those mass shooting incidents. The demand for gun control comes up from the left. What are your thoughts there?
Well, we had the SAFE Act, which was born out of the tragedy at Sandy Hook. But we all know the SAFE Act doesn't work. It punishes legal, responsible gun owners, sportsmen, hunters, etc. Let's just be honest. Criminals are criminals. Criminals will break the law. You can pass whatever law you want. A criminal, by definition, will break the law. Look at Chicago, which gets largely ignored by the mainstream media. There's more shootings and more killings by guns in Chicago, which has the strictest gun laws in the country than anywhere else. And, Obama's flying out to Oregon, he's flying here and there every time there's a shooting. But he doesn't go to his hometown of Chicago, which there's a shooting seemingly every day, and the murders are in the hundreds, and the police don't even dare go into some of these neighborhoods. Let's be honest. Gun-free zones don't work. That's just an open invitation for some deranged, crazy, evil person with a gun to go in because they know they're not going to be confronted, and and we saw that bear out in Oregon. It's absolutely terrible. So you can have all the gun control you want, but bad people do bad things, and that's the bottom line here. And it's always been that way, and it always will be that way. And a lot of these politicians, it's always just a knee-jerk reaction. Something bad happens. Oh, we got to write a law. We got to fix that. Oh, we got to take this away. Oh, we got to do that. Well, it's not that easy. It's not that easy because in the Constitution, the Second Amendment guarantees the citizens the right to bear arms.
The governor has met recently, and that was just this past week, with former Vice President Al Gore to talk greenhouse emissions and other environmental issues. What do you make of the governor getting into that issue as big as he is?
Well, yeah, Andrew Cuomo is a champion of pretty much everything on the left agenda, which would include greenhouse gases and global warming. And I'm sure Al Gore flew up on his private jet and burned up a lot of fuel to get there. And honestly, I don't put too much stock in it. I think reasonable, common sense approaches to doing things is enough. I don't really, it's common sense. The less stuff we put up in the atmosphere, the better. But as far as climate change, and it used to be called global warming until that term didn't really fit the narrative anymore, so they changed it to climate change. I'm just not one of those people that really buys into it, honestly. So I don't really put any stock in anything Al Gore has to say.
On local issues, you have a town hall coming up with Senator O'Mara and Assemblyman Noje.
Yes. Saturday, October 24th at 10 a.m. at the Hornell VFW on Canasteel Street. My guests are Senator Tom O'Mara and Assemblyman Bill Noje, who your listeners are very familiar with. We're going to be talking a lot about state topics. Maybe we'll touch national stuff a little bit, but there's so much going on at the state level. I wanted to bring these two into Hornell to, get people informed, have people ask them whatever questions they want. Get an update on the SAFE Act, and as you mentioned before, Governor Cuomo wants to do more gun control. So I know the senator and assemblyman will have a lot to say about that. The $15 minimum wage, which has been a hot topic over the last couple months here in New York State. I know they're going to weigh in on that. Common Core, Governor Cuomo wanted to make some changes to the Common Core, and he finally admitted that it wasn't rolled out properly, and there's a lot of problems with it, which we've talked about extensively on your show and others. So I know the senator and Assemblyman Noje will want to talk about that and get some information out, where they stand on things.
And not to interrupt that thought, I want to go back to your upcoming town hall. But I did want to say, I don't know if this is part of Common Core, but Congressman Tom Reed is condemning an Ithaca school for bringing in a Palestinian activist to a bunch of third graders to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to third graders. I don't know if that's part of Common Core, if they're teaching something and they brought in somebody to talk on it, or what's going on there. But, John Buckley, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with Common Core per se. That's just more Ithaca indoctrination. It's unbelievable. Whoever the teacher is, whoever the administrators are.
The administrators are claiming they didn't know anything about it, according to one of the articles I read. I think that was the Ithaca Voice. But I just thought, talking about age-appropriate things, I mean, what are you going to would you have a panel of third graders to come up with solutions?
Yeah, well, you're talking about third graders, so we're talking about, 7, 8-year-old kids.
Who would have a lot of insight into that issue?
Yes, yeah. So they're not going to have a lot of feedback or a lot of input, for that conversation. But whoever thought this was a good idea, they should really be fired. They should lose their job. That's just beyond reproach. Despicable.
We've been talking with Alderman John Buckley. He's Hornell's deputy mayor as well, and the Hornell Republican leader. John, before we got onto that issue, got a little sidetracked. We were talking about your town hall that's upcoming. Do you have a date for that yet?
Yes. It's October 24th. It's at 10 a.m. at the Hornell VFW on Canasteel Street.
Great, and we will see you there, and if you don't happen to make it, you'll see the video of the highlights of the town hall online, though I encourage everybody to go to Alderman John Buckley's upcoming town hall. John, any final thoughts before we go?
No, just a lot going on, and I hope to see everyone at the town hall that Saturday morning. It's open to the public. The more the merrier. Come on down and ask our state senator and assemblyman any questions you want, and I hope to see you down there.
John Buckley, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Hornell's Deputy Mayor, 9th Florida Alderman, Hornell Republican leader John Buckley on today's top story. I'm Brian O'Neill. Stay with us. ABC is next.